who have engaged in some economic sabotage of this airline. Why can't you arrest them, Libar? Because you are the government of the day. This is not a time for the UDA government to start lamenting that, you see, we have found KQ mismanaged and all this. Take action. If you have people to go to court, we want to see them taking plea even tomorrow. If you need to name cartels, name them. You are the government of the day. You really have the powers to tell even the Auditor General tomorrow or even today, go in and do an in-depth audit on the operations of Kenya Airways and give us a report. You can tell the DPP to move in and arrest if there are people who have been involved in any economic sabotage of that airline, so that you give us a solution as a government. And I've said this, and I want to repeat the bar. If Kenya Airways was to go under, we are not going to talk about the managing director, Alan. We'll look at UDA administration as one that is unable to manage strategic economic ventures that this country has gotten into. So fix it, and if you are unable, then you are unable to manage this country.
All right, let's wind up on it. Then we go to the SGR billions. Yusuf, you had something to say, especially with the shares. 48%.
No, yeah. Kwanza nilikuwa nataka kuwapa pole wa ndugu zetu wa Tanzania. Ajali ya ndege ya abiria ya Precision iliyosababisha vifo vya watu 19 ni jambo la kusikitisha, na tunawapa pole kwa msiba mkubwa uliopata na majonzi, na nataraji kwamba watakuwa na fursa ya kulichunguza na kuhakikisha kwamba ajali kama hizo hazitatokea au zitapunguzwa sana katika siku zijazo. Coming to the ownership of Kenya Airways, you know, there is information out there in the public domain in which majority of Kenyans think that we actually own Kenya Airways, and I think that is not the case. As Mheshimiwa has just mentioned, the state percentage holding is 48-49%. The 52% is not ours, which means we do not own a majority share holding of Kenya Airways. And this is an organization that is rotten to the core. So we need to know why do we have to bail it all the time? Why do we force the Kenyan taxpayer to carry this burden when in fact we know that 52% of the airline is not owned by us? KLM and Air France own a significant percentage of it. There are private shareholders, Kenyan private shareholders, unknown, faceless, who own 31% of it. And there have been persistent rumors that the owners of this 31% are the people who manage the Kenya Airways like a puppet from behind and make money out of it. So before we can go any further in trying to help Kenya Airways, it is absolutely necessary to reach the bottom of this crisis, to know who is who. And secondly, without a very clear blueprint, without a clear plan to salvage this organization, this strike will just be another phase in its crisis. It will not be the end. And we have just reached the dead end of it. And I think this strike marks a turning point in Kenya Airways' fortune. It either changes and rises and fixes its problems and turns its fortunes around, or it goes under.
Right.
I'm happy about the revelation by the Honorable Mogeni and what if he's saying about 48%. It used to be that where government had serious interest, we used to have 51, not 48. We used to have the controlling shares. In most companies, the government thought they needed to call shots. We used to cede off 47, 46, would retain 52, 51. But now, look at where we are. A situation where if government makes a decision today, the 51% can actually countermand anything we say we want to do. That's the truth. If decisions are made based on the normal board, drama, that's what happened. But the issue is this. So what interest does KLM Air France have in the survival of KQ? Why must it survive? If KLM flies here, Air France flies here, they would be happy to have KQ out of the way. And that's why I still believe that whatever the cost, it's a bullet we must bite. And as he has said, this is the opportunity. Cut off this toxic relationship that has been there for the last 60 years. Cut it off. Have a new beginning. And I agree with the Mogeni here that the government, the buck stops on this matter, on the doors of the government. Because most employees there are Kenyan employees, the investments there are Kenyan investments. I believe that if we look at this issue dispassionately, without sentimentalism, without feeling good about the name KQ, and say that we are here to run a profitable airline. And I can tell you, in this next 1 week, I'm going to be moving a motion in Parliament to ask government to take over KQ 100%. So that then we move forward, knowing where we want to go.
So what's the difference with nationalization and you?
What we are proposing that time,
we've been on that bit before.
What we are proposing that time, the bailout proposed that time. If you look at the document that was prepared by the COSING committee, it wasn't just nationalization. That unbundling was supposed to benefit other people, some people. It wasn't going to go 100%. No, these guys are going to remain. These guys, the shadowy guys you're talking about, were going to be taken care of with some arrangements that were extremely still shadowy. That's why we refused the report.
Okay.
Yeah. Because so many things were not being laid bare for us. But we could also see clearly that the people who we are talking about here, the 52% who are controlling things, were still intent even after nationalized. Because we are saying, okay, make KQ a national asset. Yes. Then give JKA to KQ. Give Kisumu Airport to KQ. Give Mombasa to KQ. But we are not being told in that report how much these guys are going to be paid and whether they're going to leave anyway. Because nationalizing, by the way, I don't mean that it goes 100%. No. These guys will still be retained. We could take 60.
And remember, 38% of the shareholding is actually owned by the Kenya Airways lenders. You know, the banks that have lent money to Kenya Airways. The shareholding of KLM is just a meager 7%. So again, even if the government was to take it over, it must begin by paying off the lenders who are controlling 38% shareholding of Kenya Airways. So it's a problem that is very complex.
But what is better, Senator? What is better? Having a clean start, we agree, yes. How much is it?
But how then do we audit also the bailout money that was given to KQ?
But that's the point,
we should begin there in terms of offsetting all this.
That's the point here, that money comes in.
We need accountability of how, first of all this tranche of money was used, so that if the government is coming again to Kenyans or asking for another bailout of KQ, then we have accountability.
That's my problem, Jabal, that every time we are giving a bailout, you know, this cup is empty. You keep on putting in coffee, but you can't see the level rising. Reason is that it's a bottomless pit. If it will never arise because you put in steroids, the ball. It has to be. Let me use this stupid word. You have to drain the swamp totally.
Okay.
And then you're going to lift it up.
Right. Mugatana, you wind up with you?
Yeah, on this one, first I wanted to say pole sana to the people of the travelers from Tanzania. I've used that precision very much. It's a very good, one of the best ones, you know, and it keeps time. They are always, so this was just, I think, bad luck. And we want to say pole to all the people who went through this accident. On Kenya Airways, I want to agree that we need a radical surgery. And I believe that the pilots did not make a mistake. I think they took this strike at a strategic time. The new minister was just sworn in, and he came in and found there's a problem, and this problem, he must deal with it. And as a new administration, they have an opportunity to look at the deeper things that were hidden by the previous administration and give us a solution to the problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, but maybe as we're winding up, we can't just let it go. Since we have these contractual revelations from Murkomen, which is headlining the front page of the Standard this morning, a very elaborate, of course, comprehensive report there on that contractual agreement. Could we also launch on KQ? And we see some of these shadowy companies that are behind KQ. Who owns them? What is their interest? These contractual agreements, how are they entered to? Why is KQ perpetually in this morass that they cannot really fly off from? Why is it on a mayday call every day that we need money to bail it out? So I think maybe you as legislators, you can come up with the legislation, or I don't know how you're going to put it, so that we have some revelations and investigation task force. Now that we have task force on extrajudicial killings, we can also come up with a task force on this as well. I don't know. Yusuf,
Debal, I think there is what both the SGR and the Kenya Airways have indicated as far as the government involvement is concerned is the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, the lack of inclusiveness in looking at projects in which public money is involved, taxpayers' money is involved, in which we also the way we loan money. For example, in Kenya Airways recently loaned some money internationally, and the money was guaranteed by the Kenya government, and Kenya Air was not able to pay, which meant the Treasury had to pick the bill automatically. The same thing with arrangements like the SGR and other loans. When the government of the day is not able to pay, there is a national asset that becomes the collateral. In the case of Kenya Airways, there was a plan for them to take over our airports, so that if they defaulted or their loans go to the taxpayer, it becomes a burden for the country. So all of these things point to the fact that these things were done without oversight, proper lack of accountability and transparency. We don't know what we're getting into as far as Kenya Airways is concerned, because we're not privy to the secret arrangements of Kenya Airways. We do not know what happened with the SGR. Similarly, we're now paying the cost of it. So in general, I fully agree that there are some legislations, but we need to maybe strengthen this arrangement so that when it comes to taxpayers' money, that there's a balance and check, there's oversight, and we make sure that we do not get into unfair arrangements that would adversely affect the country.
Right.
So this is very, very clear, I think, from my perspective.
I have a considerable difficulty in understanding, especially how we enter into this contractual agreement. Then Kenyans are not really privy to what we are entering, yet these are our national assets. Is there a way that all this
that should never have happened?
Yeah. Is there a way that actually all this contractual agreement can pass through Parliament for interrogation before anyone goes to negotiate? We've done this also before with the International Court of Justice on how also the maritime dispute was done. And this brought really problems, because the constitution of all these lawyers that went for the ICJ, I think was on the behest of the Attorney General then. And, even in negotiating on the table was in favor, or maybe it was not really thoroughly done. So where are we at with Somalia right now? Is there a way to salvage this country from what is happening? Every contractual agreement has to pass through Parliament so that there is scrutiny and what Kenyans are, because you're the watcher of the people.
Because
is it Omogini? Let's just begin from here, then we'll go to the question.
Okay. Yeah. First, now speaking from my heart, I would like the government to provide a solution. KQ is a sentimental attachment to Kenya Airways. When you take Kenya Airways from South Africa with the Congolese,
Yes.
you know, they tell you when you fly through Congo that, look, that's my home down there, but because you own Kenya Airways, you take us to your home, then you start distributing us. You know.
Sentimentality.
So, yes, that's sentimentality. In fact, somebody told me.
Very expensive one.
Yeah, that was in 2011. I was flying from West Africa, Cameroon. And, you know, so every time I hear that KQ may go, and I imagine me on Entebbe Airlines. Entebbe, you know, Uganda Airlines. And I'm taken first to Uganda. Then I'm distributed to Nairobi. So I really hope that we can find a solution. And as I said, you know, many airlines are struggling. Even in South Africa, you know, South Africa stopped flying to Nairobi for a number of days. Talk to anybody here, members of parliament, nobody wants to take British Airways because of what you read in the newspaper. Even last financial year, the losses were several million pounds. Not pounds. This money in the European Union, the euros. Yeah, so there's a very bad image around, you know, when your airline is getting this negative coverage, you find that people start shunning it. You saw how the Ghanaians were complaining at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. That's not the KQ they know. They know a KQ that they will take a flight to Nairobi, then they connect from Nairobi direct to their home countries. We take them to all these places in West Africa. So I want to appeal to my Murkomen, and this is my friend. We need a solution like yesterday because we are all proud of Kenya Airways. We want Kenya Airways to fly us to even World Cup in Qatar, if it's possible. So we really need a solution so that it can take to the skies. But to my colleagues, members of parliament, you know the biggest problem, Dibal, we have had as a country is the overt control that the executive has had over parliament. Even if tomorrow we started investigating this matter and you get some overt interference from the government of the day, telling members of parliament not to write a report that is so hard on government, you will still find that government will direct the conclusion that a report will take, which is really sad. All these issues we have asked, if you look at our constitution, Parliament is supposed to be the most powerful institution. In Article 125, you can summon any cabinet secretary. If today my colleague here went to National Assembly and summoned Murkomen, CS Murkomen will be in Parliament to give every information that we require as parliamentarians. But we have this cozy relationship with the government of the day, whereby, I remember in this KQ issue, let's be candid and honest, the lending banks, some of the banks that were lending money to KQ, it was rumored the shareholders were connected to a very top executive in the Jubilee government. And therefore, members do not want to be seen to be going very hard in their recommendations.
To ruffle feathers.
Yes, because of these 38% lenders.
Why don't you just be direct? Because you are saying something and you are doing the same thing at the same time. Why don't you just say that CBA at that time, the chairperson of Kenya Airways, that time was also the chairperson of NCBA. I mean, just be direct. If you want Parliament to do that, you have to be direct and say it the way it is.
In fact, Dibalo, we were in a show. You were hosting us on NTV morning when a Jubilee legislator, who is now a UDA member of Parliament, raised strong objections when the issues that Honorable Cheng is raising were raised by one of the panelists. So the point I'm making is that really, let's have fidelity to the law, and we place the trust that Kenyans has placed on us to be of benefit to the people of Kenya. So that all these issues we are mentioning, the people in government who are conflicted, who want to trigger some economic sabotage in these some of these establishments to their own benefit, can be named. And as I've said this morning, if we need to have people take plea in court to save Kenya, let the UDA administration do it. We'll support them as opposition.
So should the CS be summoned in Parliament?
That should be the beginning point. Because there are a lot of
we need just
there are also questions begging for answers.
The issue is a very band-aid with also the strike.
Yes,
because it is very systemic within Kenya Airways. I mean, the pilots just striking is just the epitome of it. But there is a festering wound under KQ that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
And the CS should actually come up and with a very good, robust plan on how we can rescue KQ. So the first port of call should be Parliament. you are amending, or we've already amended the standing orders?
No,
The
we
CS
haven't
to appeal?
amended, but
You have
nothing
to
stops
summon.
us.
It can still be summoned.
It can still be summoned.
It can still be summoned.
Yeah.
Not for a committee, but the entire National Assembly.
no. The
You know,
committee.
even Parliament sitting can convert itself to the committee of the whole.
Okay.
And you interrogate a CS on the floor. Yeah.
So I wanted to agree that the CS should actually come and start this conversation in the House. But I was going to answer your question. Should these agreements
Yes.
come to Bunge, all of them, the agreements that are committing huge sums of taxpayers' money, should they come to Parliament? And I think yes. Why? Because when we are looking at the debt ceiling for the Kenya government, how much the executive can go and commit us, they must come to Parliament. So when we are giving them the leeway for them to go and enter agreements, they come to us. But then when they are doing those agreements, especially those very huge agreements, they have no obligations to come to us. So I think there is a disconnect there. And I wanted to agree with you that maybe we can look at how we can improve the legislation around committing the national taxpayers' money, too much of it, into a project, especially infrastructure project, without parliamentary approval. In the same way they get parliamentary approval for debt ceiling, they should also get parliamentary approval for very huge contracts that are infrastructure-based, so that the ministers can come and justify. And I think if that is done, we will have better details. We will not have the situation like SGR until a new minister is coming. That's when we are getting the details. I think this ought to be done, and there is a lacuna there, and it's a challenge to us as legislators to look at what we can do for the laws to be better than the way they are. Thank you.
Yeah, Dibala, I agree with you, because just across the border in Uganda here, they cannot borrow $500 million Kenya shillings without going through Parliament. Of course, there will be issues that Congo is raising about MPs being, talked to and all that. But if the law is there, that there's a threshold, that anything beyond $500 million or $1 billion has to come through Parliament with details. Because for me, the issue, Dibali, is not even about accountability. The issue is the value for money. And I want to give me 2 minutes to talk about the SGR.
Yes, please. Let's go there.
Because for me, SGR was a project that was, in my opinion, marvelous. Because it had a chance creating over a million jobs. How so? If you looked at the whole value chain, supply side, demand side of SGR as a contract and construction, it was such a project that would create so many jobs, leave us with so much knowledge about running the SGR and other offshoots. Because look, SGR required you to use cement, use rolling stock, use steel. There's so many things around it. If, for example, Kenya has a company called, it's a government company called the Numerical Machining Company, that would easily, given 6 months, be able to supply all the bolts and nuts that were required for SGR. What did we do? We imported all that, therefore exporting jobs that we needed at home. Dibal, for the first 8 months of SGR, the Chinese refused to use Kenyan cement, saying it didn't have some component there. I was still in private sector at that time, and we made noise. And by the time they were now saying they can use Kenyan cement, they imported so much cement that they didn't need our cement. Human resource. The SGR used 80% Chinese labor. What about the loans and how they're going to be paid? These projects that are heavy are supposed to industrialize the country. They're supposed to help create jobs. They're supposed to transfer technology. For me, in Parliament, I would be looking out for those ones, not even how much. I'm looking out at, if you're doing Kalana Kulalu, and you're saying it's going to spend 50 billion, why are we importing pipes for irrigation? So my focus will be on value for money, first of all. Because we're saying, look, this contract says that when you're buying anything related to SGR, preference will be given to Chinese products.
First of all.
That's what the product says. That's what the contract says. That even if Germany or Kenya gives you a better price, the first port of call is Chinese products related to that. And that's where you saw that the first hostesses in the SGR were Chinese.
And the captains as well.
Yeah, so the issue for me, and I want you to be very clear on this, Dibal, when you're dealing with these matters, let us not even look at the quantum first of the money. Let us look at what is the impact of this to the economy. We are now talking about, and I now belong to Kenya Kwanza and you know it, we're talking about building 100 dams in the country. I want to be told, who is going to build these dams? How is our labor going to be used? Who is supplying the machines that are going to be doing this? So that we are looking at value for money first before you talk about the quantums of the money. Same thing for KQ. I want to be told, because in the last 10 years, KQ has downsized, and most of the guys who are being downsized are Kenyans. You don't hear that the Europeans have been removed. It's Kenyans being removed. So basically, we are subsidizing KLM France, Air France and KLM by retaining their people at work and, getting our people out of work. So I would want us to have a holistic audit of these contracts and how they work. And for example, if we're talking about steel from Mombasa all the way. I mean, the gauge, the 1 meter gauge line that we have today led to Wote, led to Voi, led to Maseno, led to all these towns being, and it was built at less than 2% of the cost of SGR. Tell me which town, which industry, which company grew because of spending 500 billion shillings on SGR? Nil. And so I would look at,
thank you.
This is what I would want us to look at, whether we are putting money into KQ or putting money into SGR or putting money into any other strategic investment. The economy comes first. Kenyan jobs come first.
Poor planning also has come to the fore, because we've had all this ad hocery way of planning on SGR. That first of all, we come up with the standard gauge railway itself. Then we realize that we need now to electrify it, or we didn't really account for 40 billion shillings to actually electrify this particular railway. Again, now we need to also have a parallel, tarmac road alongside, SGR. All these are not in plan from the word go. And all these expenses, because these really also dents deeper on the taxpayers' money. And then because of poor planning. That's what I'm saying. If all these things are passed through Parliament, you'll be able to question.
But that's precisely...
You want to electrify. Where is the money to electrify?
That's precisely my earlier point of inclusivity, accountability, and transparency. All of these things are missing. Look at this issue of Kenya Airways flying, the pride of Africa, is misplaced pride. It's sentimental. We've spent 60 billion shillings rescuing Kenya Airways, and Kenya Airways is going to fail. Think of how much that money would do for us. I come from a poor urban neighborhood. We would have been able to construct affordable housing and get rid of all the slums in Nairobi. We would have been able to build hospitals, schools, inputs that would have raised the quality of life and our economy much better than what Kenya Airways does for us. So when you come to the SGR, it's the same thing. SGR in its earlier conception was a game changer, which would, if implemented properly, with public involvement and local resources, would have had a transformative impact. Instead, and then because it was originally going to Uganda and Rwanda, the idea that in the end it ended up in the middle of nowhere by itself was that there was no vision as to how this thing was going to pan out. It was an ad hoc thing. And why would we in this age build a one gauge diesel run railway?
Indeed.
When in fact Ethiopia, Senegal, Nigeria, Morocco have built electric run railway lines that are cheaper and more efficient than ours. So here, the bottom line is that this thing was micromanaged in a very casual way. It was done like a village project, rather than a national project that would have helped transform our country. And there are a lot of lessons we need to learn from. And I don't see the point of spending a lot of energy now on blame game, because I can see that now it is becoming a political issue. It's not a political issue. It is a terrible mess of which we're all responsible for, collectively, because the people who are in the current government were also in the previous government, and they played a major role in that project. So the failure of that project is not a failure of a particular government, of a previous government. It's a failure for us, and we need to address it holistically rather than blaming game of saying it is the previous regime or so and so. And I think on the issue of debt, I think we need to really come to grips with how we manage our national debt, because we now have a runaway national debt, which is going to become very difficult to service given our economic problems. And I know Mheshimiwa David Ochieng and myself were in the last parliament when this issue of raising the ceiling was brought. It was like an emergency. It hits you on the floor of the house, and you're told, if you don't pass this now, we're going to default on our debts, and our country is going to be in an economic crisis. So what do you do as a legislator? Do you do the responsible thing?
You save the day.
Yes. So I think we need to look at this thing in a sober mind. Kenya Airways in a sober mind, SGR and the future of SGR, because if you look from an economic perspective, building a dual carriage road from Mombasa to Kampala would have brought us a lot of dividends. Look at how much Thika Highway has transformed. That small route between Thika and Nairobi. It has created so many economic dividends that the entire neighborhoods between here and Thika are booming. What do you think if you spend that money you spent on SGR, on a road that connects all the villages, all the towns, all the neighborhoods between here and the Ugandan border? Our country would be up there. Our economy would be booming.
Indeed.
Yes.
Right. It was a surprise also for President Uhuru Kenyatta. I think I was after the show one time with one of the legislators when they were launching this SGR, that the president was, his face was crestfallen, because he did expect a diesel,
the old wagons.
Yeah, this wagon. He expected a bullet, electrified bullet, and so he was really, murmuring on his side. Is this what you really? Yeah. So even the president himself was surprised. This all archaic, diesel engine-driven wagon is what actually we are launching. It's not doing the bullet, and it's not even electrified at the end of the day. So we were shortchanged at some point.
Dibal, first, I think we were doing an NTV show in 2018, and there was a caption you played, and the president was promising a journalist, I can't remember who it was.
It was Mark Masai.
It was Mark Masai. Yes. That I'll give you this document, you can share with Kenyans. It's taken over 5 years for us Kenyans
to know the truth.
To know the truth. Me as a member of
what can we do with that
truth,
though?
We are getting this information, but 5 years down the line.
We've crossed the Rubicon, isn't it?
There's nothing much. But you can imagine how this is a public document, but there are some people in government who don't even want you to know the truth. What does that tell you? It tells you that there are people who have benefited from this SGR. That you can take to the bank. And that's why I feel sad that Ethics and Corruption Commission has not fixed the corruption involving kickbacks in government contracts. It is so sad, Debal, because anytime you see Kenya getting such a road deal, somebody somewhere has pocketed millions of dollars. That is a fact, I can tell you. Take it to the bank. Somebody somewhere has put millions of dollars into his private bank account somewhere.
Right.
You can imagine the truck in Ethiopia that runs to Djibouti is about, I think, 756 kilometers. And they spent 3.4 billion US dollars. It's electric engine, not diesel. Ours is 3.2 billion for a stretch of 506 kilometers. Look at that difference. You'd have had a train. If this was electric wired, you would have a Ugandan taking the SGR from Entebbe, and it will be Nairobi in less than an hour, because the speed is 200 kilometers per hour.
Yep.
You know, now you take SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi, it takes you 6 hours.
And it's not dual.
It's not dual.
So you have to wait for other truck to come back.
Yes.
Yeah, you need to.
But there's no railway station, SGR station in central Nairobi or in central Mombasa.
Yeah.
You have to travel 1 hour through traffic to get there.
And all this because somebody somewhere in government wanted to milk the country dry.
Okay.
I mean,
David
the point I'm making is, unless the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission fixes the big corruption in government tenders, we will never have a solution. This thing you're being told about money lending, you know, when I was in the committee that was picked by the two houses, one from National Assembly and Senate, I was there with Senator Cheriot, who is now majority in National Assembly, and we were put under in the Senate. We were together when I received a call from a CS threatening me and saying, "We are told you are the one causing trouble in that committee. You must sign the report approving the increase of the debt." And you can read the report. I refused, and I said I cannot auction my country.
But now you have a chance to, of course, implement Bunyasi Sakwa's
I'm telling you this because tomorrow,
on the debt ceiling.
Tomorrow you're going to see another request will come.
Another call.
I'm telling you,
another call to
you in government, the pressure. I'm telling you the pressure. I remember that in that committee, the pressure that we were under as senators. You know, till you wonder really, why are we then elected if the government
we to wind up somewhere?
You know, wants to run us through remote control, because they really push you. We were pushed. If you talk to Senator Cheriot, he will tell you. He also refused to sign, I remember, but we were under a lot of pressure. You know, so we wrote a dissenting report and said, on this one, we don't understand why we are borrowing. Nobody's giving you details on what this money is going to do. It would make sense the way Honorable Ching has said. And I don't know why this Ruto left you out. Your brilliant ideas.
I don't want to go to cabinet.
You should have been in cabinet.
No, I'm MP.
You should have been in cabinet.
You see the ban.
Honorable Ching is saying.
Okay. Can we listen to the and we come to you?
Yeah.
The point I was making,
I wanted to
let him finish.
The point I was making, Honorable Ching has made a very good point. That let it be the practice that before we allow our country to sign these big contracts, let them be placed on the floor of the House.
Indeed.
At least as the people's representative, exercising sovereign power. We interrogate them, and then we can make one comment. Do you know this SGR contract? If we were to go to arbitration, the law applicable is the Chinese law.
Chinese law.
Can you imagine?
Chinese law.
Chinese law is what's applicable, and we will do the arbitration in China.
And the contract was actually written in Mandarin.
Can you imagine?
With the Chinese characters.
Can you imagine?
Then you... So how are they deciphering
these are some of the clauses that we could have scrutinized as members of Parliament.
And then to add on that point, look at what the SGR, how it was signed. You have the managing director of Kenya Railways on one side, without any other person accompanying him. Then you have the managing director, or Li Qiang, of the China Roads and Bridges, accompanied by another Chinese. The MD signs and puts his name and the date. It is passed to the next person who signs, puts his name. The Chinese guy gives it also to his fellow Chinese. The corporation secretary is so uncomfortable, he refuses to sign. He refused to sign. Later on, I think under pressure, he signs. He signs, he doesn't put his name. And I think for a good reason, because he's a lawyer. Then later on, the rubber stamp of the corporation, I think, against even his instructions, are put on the agreement without him signing his name. There's a lot of manenos inside this thing. I can bet some people are paid billions just to sign that agreement. Some people are paid billions just to give the instruction so that somebody can sign the agreement. And then later on, these people are the ones who are used as sacrificial lamb, and the big guys got away with it. So I think we need to have, even if we need to move on, some investigations must be carried out on this.
Indeed.
I think the new government has an opportunity. I think Murkomen should not stop at giving us the document. he should stop at let us have a commission of inquiry.
Indeed.
Let us know who was culpable. Let those people come forward and say, I was forced. By who? By so and so. Now those ones, let them now face criminal liability, because we must bring some sense of discipline in public affairs. And I think this is an opportunity for the new administration to put its foot down so that Kenyans can see that this is not going to be the way things are going to operate in future. That is what I think should happen.
Right.
I've heard in the last few days people talking about witch hunt. And if you want to call it witch hunt, there's going to be a lot of witch hunt. Because the president that I've sat with is determined to deal with these things you're talking about. He's not determined to ensure that things are done right. If you were to open up what Honorable Mgatani is talking about, I'll give you 3 examples.
Briefly, we're winding up, yeah.
As we speak, Kenya Pipeline was forced to turn its oil pipelines into water pipelines to supply Mombasa with water. I need to check that.
Yes. Yeah.
And this was done not by anybody else, but the president himself. The last few days of the last government, the Kenya Ports Authority, the head of legal, then were being forced to sign a contract allowing somebody else to come and run the port. Thanks to Okiya Mtata, there was a case in court, but the last 5 days to elections, some signatures were made. Go to Northlands here, what are you talking about here? How much money was used to getting things into private land? The SGR is a cross regime. You will find ODM there. You will find Jubilee there. You will find Uda there. You will find everyone else there.
So everyone will be culpable.
Because remember, that the SGR was a Kibaki project.
Yes.
That then and that's why you had that time a lot of noise saying, oh, this was our thing and all that. So it was a cross regime thing, and that's why I hope that when these things start unraveling, we in Parliament will not close ranks and hide corruption.
Right.
Because for me, my issue is that the leadership in this country has gone so low that anything goes.
Yeah.
This is the fear that I have personally. That the places where Kenyans hope to get justice have all been auctioned. And I'm hoping that in the fullness of time and through proper fighting, Kenyans can regain parliament, Kenyans can regain judiciary, and Kenyans can regain the executive. For me, if you don't do those 3, and we do things the way we've done it before, we're going to be sinking deeper.
Thank you. Yusuf, your closing remarks.
Well, I think it is important for us to learn lessons learned. I think it is only foolish people who never learn from their mistakes. And I think now that these things have been opened up, that the onus is on us to do them properly, to investigate them properly, to close the loopholes, and to create institutional and legal framework in which we can do things much better and avoid some of the terrible mistakes that have cost us a lot, whether it is Kenya Airways, whether it is SGR, and there are many other institutions which are not in the limelight that have been abused, mismanaged, and are costing the Kenyan government and the taxpayer and our economy a lot.
Thank you very much. Congo Mogini, your closing remarks.
A request is to just a plea to His Excellency President William Ruto to allow Parliament to thrive. In all these issues we are raising, if you left Parliament to be independent and to discharge its responsibilities without interference and coercion, the beneficiaries will be the people of Kenya. So I really hope that under his government, he will allow Parliament to thrive so that we can assist in oversighting and raising the bar of accountability on the executive.
Thank you. Mungatana, finally.
Just to ask the Minister for Transport to take a firm stand. He must turn the history. It should not be business as usual.
Indeed. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate that incisive, immersive discussion you've had. And of course, we do hope also the upper reaches of government are listening in right now that we've been given this particular contractual agreement, what to do, right? We need to see action on it. And the government should not be greatly shy, especially the Ministry of Transport, in making sure that they go full extent to try and list the people who are beneficiaries of SGR Even if you're shooting yourself in the foot, honesty is the best policy, they say. And of course, Kenyans will see that at least the government is trying enough to make sure transparency is brought to the fore. Really do appreciate your valued company. Don't go away. Much more is coming up also on the other side of the studio in Mombasa Road, all about sports. Remember also the